Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, where each week we talk about ideas for raising kids who become thriving adults. I'm your host, Audrey Monkey. I'm a summer camp director, writer, and speaker, and I've had the privilege of working with thousands of children, teenagers, young adult counselors, and parents over the past 3 decades. My husband, Steve, and I are raising 5 kids who currently range in age from 15 to 25. So my interest in raising kind, optimistic, self-reliant kids who become thriving adults is personal as well as professional. In episode 70, I'm chatting with Amy Carney. She is a speaker and writer and author of the recent book, Parent on Purpose, A Courageous Approach to Raising Children in a Complicated World. I really enjoyed my conversation with Amy, and I hope you get some inspiration from our talk. Enjoy. Well, I'm really excited to have Amy Carney on the podcast today. Amy is a writer who focuses on, well, I'll actually let you explain what you focus on. Welcome, Amy, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Amy, why don't you start with just explaining, we were talking before we started recording about your writing and what you focus on. Explain I loved the name of your topic. So explain what you write about.
Well, I write about parenting on purpose, intentional parenting, for the fact that my firstborns were triplets, and then I had another one a year later, and I just found myself surviving motherhood, and I figured out there's got to be a better way. And so I just write about my journey of being proactive instead of reactive.
That's wonderful. I feel like that's a really important way people learn. You know, the reason that we can share wisdom is because we learned it the hard way.
Yeah, right.
You from your own, like, oh my gosh, I've got to figure this out. It sounds like you learned some things that now you're sharing with others through your writing and your speaking.
Yes.
Well, I'm especially excited to talk to you today because we're going to talk about your book that you have coming out in January. So when this podcast comes out, the book will be out, which is exciting. Your book is called Parent on Purpose, A Courageous Approach to Raising Children in a Complicated World. And just the title alone shows that this is kind of, I'm guessing, the compilation of all that you've learned over your years of parenting.
Yes, and it's based on, in 2014, we pulled out of life. My husband was a professional hockey player, and then he was coaching with the Chicago Blackhawks. I was raising 4 young children, and we were your typical American family living for success and achievement, performance, and we were doing a pretty good job at that, but we were super disconnected, and it wasn't, all of a sudden we looked at our family one day, we're like, this is nothing like what we thought we would do with our kids or how our family would be. And so we decided to buy an RV and take off around the entire US for 7 months and regroup as a family. So the book stemmed from that courageous decision in our family.
Oh my gosh, I feel like that is one of those like daydreams or dreams that parents always have. I always had the dream of moving to another country and learning a new language with the kids. And of course, I never was courageous enough, and just life and our business and my, aging parents and everything made it difficult. But I love that you did that. And I guess we don't all have to do that though, to parent on purpose, do we?
No. And when it says, a lot of times when I tell that story or you hear about that, it sounds amazing, right? We do have this dream, but that was never a dream of ours. I mean, we never camped a day in our life. We knew nothing about camping. It was more something like a medicine our family needed. We had to make a change, and a big change. And so it was an overhaul for our family more than a fun trip.
Well, I think those dramatic kind of things can really serve as a catalyst for change. Yeah. I think sometimes if you really need to regroup and reframe and it's a great idea. So how old were your kids when you did this, when you all lived in an RV together? I'm just curious.
We pulled them out of 6th and 7th grade. So
okay.
My triplets turned 13 on the trip, and our daughter was 11.
Yeah, I think listeners will feel that that's even more courageous. So you had the pre-adolescent, adolescent age. And, I think that's also a time that people are so hypersensitive about school and and sports and all this stuff. And what a great lesson that all your kids are turning out just fine, even though you took that break.
Yeah, and that's the number one question everybody asks. The first question is, did you homeschool them? How did you homeschool them? And I'm like, I didn't. I unschooled them. Like, my whole point of this and our whole point was to get away from the stress and the pressure. And I have one son that's super driven academically, and he was so worried. I'm not going to make it into National Junior Honor Society if we go on this trip. And like, buddy, there's so much more to the world. I mean, we are a family that we do want them to be excellent students, and we do believe in education, but there's other things in the world that we that are just as important. And so we wanted to share
Yeah. I love that. Okay. So what were some of the, what was the focus of your trip? What were you wanting to achieve? I mean, the trip itself wasn't the dream, but you had a dream of making a change in your family. And what was that you wanted to accomplish from the trip?
Well, we just needed to play more. We just needed more downtime, more. I read in the book about the time it hit me. I think we were a few months in, and we were just outside in Indiana, and it was getting dark, and there was all these flickering lights, and kids are like, what's going on? What are those? I'm like, oh my gosh, they're fireflies. Like, my kids I grew up catching lightning bugs in Indiana, and they've never seen this. And so on a night we should have been home driving the kids around to their sports, we were outside catching fireflies together. I mean, we were just trying to reclaim time together, build relationship back again. Not that that's our big focus, but it was getting away from us. And they were at an age where we were going to lose them, and we hadn't built that foundation in our family that we had hoped to. And so on that trip we did.
Oh, that is amazing. What were some of we'll get into, maybe you'll talk about this in the book too, but I would love to know, did you have specific traditions that you started on the trip to connect and talk to each other, or did it just organically happen because of all the free time and the time together?
Yeah, I would just say it more organically happened. And the cool thing is, and I didn't realize, is that being stuck in a small space with a family of 6 kind of forces you to work things out, to communicate. Where at home, if you have arguments, everyone can go to their rooms. Well, that wasn't possible. So we really learned how to communicate and to apologize and to come back together and move on, to become more flexible. And traditions, it's funny because actually we let go of probably more traditions and more went with the flow, which is not like me, which is not like our family. We were very scheduled. So it was kind of awesome to wake up each day and what are we going to do? What do we feel like doing today? And we did a lot of things. We did a lot of geocaching. We did a lot of, the junior ranger, the park ranger in the national parks. So we did a lot of cool things that, in our normal day, just we would not have time for.
So let's talk about the book and kind of the sections of the book, because I thought it really shows. So your sections in the book. The first one is lead. And you say the chapters are visualize the end, determine your values, claim your authority. Why don't you talk a little bit about what you learned about that, about just leading your family? Okay.
Well, like I said in the beginning, I just felt I was constantly reacting. We were just reacting to the day, and we had no real plan. And then I realized my kids are growing up and I'm losing them all. I'm going to lose them all in 1 year coming up here soon. And what did I want that to look like? What did I want my kids as 18-year-olds walking out the door of my home? What did I want that to look like? And I had no idea. And so on that trip, my husband and I were able to talk about that more. And what did we want? What do we want to instill in our children? What do we want to take the time to teach? And so I think that whole section of my book is about kind of pausing and figuring out your destination. Where are you headed? Where do you want to go? And it's not about creating some outcome for the kids. It's just about us coming together to figure out what values are really important to us and what type of adult would we like to launch, and then how can we help them get to that place?
Oh, I love that. It is so true. I think in life, we tend to not be intentional enough, even with our own personal values. Oftentimes we haven't articulated them to ourselves or taken the time to reflect so that we can in turn share them with others. So with families, I think what you experience is very common with families. You're just kind of going with what everyone else is doing. And then all of a sudden you look around and say, wait, this isn't what we value or want. So, I mean, one example, I know you guys are a big sports family. Obviously, your husband's a professional athlete, so sports are a big thing, but that's one area that can get out of hand if you don't really know what your values are around it. Because I think being physically fit and healthy is so important. And so that is a value that my husband and I really do want our kids to, we want to instill that in our kids, taking care of themselves and, getting exercise and all that. However, it seems like society or our culture often takes that to such an extreme with, where if a sport literally takes up all a child's free time and all your family discretionary time, is that really what you want? And some families it may be, but boy, you should decide before you just do it, right?
Yes.
Because your kids can just grow up and they can all of a sudden be 18 and you can be looking back and going, oh, so all of our vacations were tournaments, staying in these hotels at tournaments. And that's what we spent our money and our time on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm seeing a lot of, and I've been watching, I love learning from the parents who go before us, right? And seeing how parenting looks in the stage ahead of me. And I was seeing a lot of parents launching their kids with a lot of regret and guilt, and that their kid's gone and they didn't do all the things that they had hoped to do or wanted to do. And not that we necessarily can do that, but I think if we look more toward that end and parent today with that in mind, we'll be able to launch them with a little more peace and a little more, not as much guilt. So
I've seen a lot of different lists of different values, and I've seen that in a lot of books recently. What did you in your book? Was there a specific group of values that you list, or do you kind of help people think about the different values? What do you do in that part of your book?
Yeah, I do, and I have an appendix in the back where I list some different tools to go along with the book, and in the back I list 92 values for people to look at and highlight, because our values are different, right? We don't all have the same values. And our number one value is faith and instilling faith in our kids. And we were not doing a very good job of that for a long time. And then when we kind of looked at our values, and I call it minding the value gap, this is what I say, but this is what I'm doing, right? We're very busy in sports and we're not getting to church ever. I mean, how can I say faith is my number one value? And so just closing that gap on what we say and believe, but how we're actually living.
Oh, I love that. It's like bringing it into congruence, because that's when you don't feel right? That's when when your values and your actions aren't matching up, is when you just don't feel good about your life and what's going on. But when they do, that's when you're feeling at peace, okay, this is where we want to be. Well, that's wonderful. Okay. So part 2 of your book is love. And you've already talked a little bit about how you needed to bring more play and disconnecting to reconnect. You did that in a big way. And then you also talk about creating timeless traditions. So why don't you talk about anything from that section of the book that you really want to pull out, or that you have found yourself speaking about a lot with the parents you work with?
Okay. Well, that section's based on what we talked about in the beginning, the trip, and just slowing down in life and simplifying. Even just with this magic elf tradition, people get stressed out with some of the things they're trying to create and do in their family. And it just shouldn't be hard work all the time. I mean, parenting on purpose can be hard work for sure. But that chapter is more about how can we build relationship with our kids, with our loved ones, but by maybe doing less, getting off the sidelines of their lives. Like I said, we're at sports all the time, and I am sitting on the sidelines. Okay, but that's not building relationship. But maybe that drive to that game, how do I build relationship with them during that time? And how can I build relationship with them in other ways? So that whole section 2 on love is creating loving relationships in our family, and creating a family, a culture that your kids want to move home or come back for. I don't want them moving home. That's not what I mean. Right. But coming back to with fond childhood memories.
Oh, I know. I think that's what we all want, is you want to launch them with hopefully these core values that are going to help them have a really happy, healthy, successful life full of good relationships, and keep that kind of that connection with home, and want to come back and reconnect with their siblings and all that. I mean, I feel like that's what most of us want for our families.
I agree.
So I love that. Okay. So this part, I love talking about this. This is one of my favorite topics. Part 3 is about launching your kids. And I think that especially I've watched, because I now follow you and see what you're posting about. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, some of the things that you're having your kids do as high schoolers. Like I know specifically you really focus on volunteering as a family, and then you also make sure that your kids work. And I'd love to hear how you make that happen, because I know in my family, I have a kid who I'm encouraging to work, and he thinks he doesn't have time. So explain. I would love to hear how you're making that work for your high school kids. How are you fitting in? How do you work the schedule? What do you give up so that there's time for the volunteering and the work?
Yeah, that's great question, because that's the biggest thing I hear. I speak a lot on life skills and working and things like that. And people always say, well, my kids are too busy. Well, my kids are very busy. Our kids are all busy, right? But for me, I look back at my life, and I began working at 15 years old at Burger King. And most of us were working as teenagers in some form or fashion. But you look at teenagers today, and it's very rare that they are working, because we're busy with them doing other things. So my husband and I knew that at 16, they were going to get their driver's licenses, and they were going to need to contribute some money to gas. We have them pay for their gas to drive the family car. And so, well, how can they earn money? So when they were in middle school, we actually helped them start an eBay business, and they've been selling shoes online. So they got a taste of earning money before they could actually go and work. And then we have a friend, our old neighbor, who owns a breakfast restaurant here. And one day we were all in there eating, and he said, hey, how old do these guys have to be before they can get a job? And he's like, come interview with me when you're 15. And so one did, and he got the job. He was a host, and then he got his brother the job, and then the next brother got a job. And now our daughter, who's 15, just started hosting as the boys moved to busing tables. So I think if working is a value for your family, I think just thinking of who you might know that will work alongside your kids, because they are busy. They can't work every Saturday and Sunday. And finding someone that shares in those same values with you and understands what you're trying to do for your kids, and comes alongside you and will help them, get a job and work around their flexible schedule. So I think it's really important, if kids are carrying cell phones and they're driving cars, that they contribute to those costs.
Gosh, I agree 100%. And as you were talking, I was just thinking about how many parents could almost collaborate together and partner. Like, they might have a business where they could like employ a friend's child part-time, and then they might be able to help you. Because to me, like, we have a business and our kids have all worked in it as soon as they were eligible. But my kids have very much benefited from working other places.
Yes.
And so even though they can help in the family business, and I think a lot of people who have a family business, like a restaurant or a retail store, that's a terrific training ground for kids. But how great would it be if we kind of work together to allow our kids to work for friends when they can do a 2 or 3 hour shift as opposed to an 8-hour shift or something like that. So I really like this concept. And it seems like I know other parents of teenagers would love to get their kids appropriate jobs. So about like on an average, like how many hours a week do your kids usually work? And is it in like smaller shifts, or how does that work at the restaurant?
Well, like this weekend, no, my daughter was there 7 hours Saturday and 7 hours Sunday, and she was struggling last night to get her homework done, but that's okay. Sometimes, to learn how to juggle things. And then another son, he took the ACT on Saturday, so he only worked on Sunday. I have one that's in hockey at a high level, so he cannot work in the restaurant right now. So he's actually babysitting. I call it mentoring. A friend's 6-year-old boy. So he babysat Friday night. And I think there's a lot of ways kids can work without having to actually go into that restaurant. And then when his season is over and he's more free, he'll be able to get some shifts.
Right. Gosh, that restaurant, that's so fun. That's like your whole family works there.
I know. It's like the family business that isn't ours.
That is so great, though.
How fun. I'm so grateful to them.
Yeah, Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I was a Coco's waitress. That was my high school job. And I remember like the best thing was when like my dad and mom would come into breakfast, while I was working and they'd leave me a big tip or something, and it was just like, I have these memories and I felt really proud putting on my silly Coco's uniform and going off. And I worked during the summers. I only worked during the summers, but I worked 40 hours a week. I did like the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. And boy, that was such great experience. Like, the keeping up with the speed of the restaurant and the rushes and like people's preferences and the customer service. I learned so much. Yeah. So I think that's great. I really feel like retail or restaurant jobs are so good for our kids.
It's really good for them. And they learn so many life lessons. I mean, they come home, they know how to tip and how important it is to tip. And that these waitresses and waiters are, the people working in the kitchen, they work 2 jobs just to pay bills. I mean, they learn so many things in there about real life that they could never learn in school or, on their sports teams. So I'm just so happy that they're learning these lessons now and paying for gas and cell phone.
Oh, it's so good. And, it's interesting. There's a lot of recent research that the times have really changed from when we went through school where, it used to be that you needed a college degree to get a job and then you build your way up in a company. Well, now it's almost like flipped. They want people who can do things and like learn how to do computer programming and they're looking for kids with actual skills. And so now getting a college degree doesn't mean you're going to get some great job. And we have a lot of underemployed college students they've graduated from college and they're doing a job that doesn't require a college degree. Conversely, Google and other places are now not requiring a college degree because they're finding that someone who's worked for several years is bringing more value. Yes. So I really think we need to flip kind of our parenting ideas, like to be more intentional about this, that like you said, if the goal is raising this capable person, some of the things that we make, the decisions we make, like when they're in high school, really make an impact. And I agree with you. Like, this is what people ask me because I used to have my girls make dinner once a week. As soon as they were old enough to drive, part of that responsibility was helping pick up siblings and do some of the family driving, do some family errands, including the grocery store, and cooking dinner once a week. And I had one daughter who loves cooking and was super into it and was always finding recipes and getting really into it. And one who was like, I don't really know what to make, but she still figured it out. And they all have come back and told me afterwards, wow, I can't believe these people I live with don't know how to cook, even just basic things. And so it's like knowing how to cook a chicken breast or, pasta or whatever. I mean, it's just simple things. But so and people would say, well, oh, my kid has this sports and they have this, that, and the other. I'm like, okay, yeah, think about being an adult. Right. And how you have a job and your family and your commitments, and you still have to feed your family. So our kids learning how to make tacos that take 15 or 20 minutes is really an important skill. It doesn't have to be some fancy gourmet meal, but just that basic skill. So I do think that's, again, a value clarification thing. And it's like when a parent says to a kid, oh no, you don't have to help clean up from dinner because you have too much homework. Right. Like, I don't think that's right. Let's all help clean up together. That's fine. Or take turns or whatever. But no, adults, when we're tired and have work to do, we still put our dish in the dishwasher or,
I say we have to raise contributors, not just consumers.
Yes.
I mean, we're all contributing.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes parents get into, and I got myself into this sometimes where I'm like serving my children to the point of like, wait a minute. What's going on here? Like, I'm chopping up your fruit and I'm doing all this stuff. And I'm like, wait a minute. Sometimes they should be serving me. Sometimes I'm serving them. We're all helping each other. We're all contributing, but it should be kind of, as they get older, they're contributing more and more.
For sure.
Yeah, it's so great. Well, Amy, I'm really excited about your book. Why don't you tell more about where people can find it and also where they can find you and other information about the speaking that you do and everything else.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm in Arizona, so most of my speaking and events are on my website at amycarney.com. My company is Parent on Purpose, so you can find me at parentonpurpose.com as well. I do have an events tab where everything I'm doing will be listed there. You'll be able to find my book right there on my site or on Amazon.
Awesome. Well, I am so excited to read your book. I will definitely get it the day it's available, which I think it's already available. We're recording in December, but this is going to come out. When this comes out, your book came out now in the past on January 11th. So it's available now for purchase, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then I will put links to your website and where people can get your book and everything else about you on our show notes for this week.
Awesome. And I would like to say that one of the reasons I wrote the book is because I'm giving proceeds back to foster care in Arizona, because we are an adoptive family out of the foster care system. And so that's very important to me that I give back to organizations that help these kids who are living in foster care.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So is it a specific organization you're donating to, or just everything?
No, I'm working with different organizations, but I'm also working with different corporations and places and letting them choose the foster care organization that means something to them. So,
oh, that's amazing.
A lot of people are going to benefit.
That is amazing. Okay, I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm inspired to find my kids jobs, first of all, and many other things. So thanks so much for coming on today, Amy.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the Sunshine Parenting Podcast. As always, the show notes and links that we talked about from this episode will be on my website at sunshine-parenting.com. If you're a new listener and you're interested in the topics I cover, please take a moment to subscribe to my weekly email, which I send out every Wednesday, and I include my most recent podcast episodes and blog posts, as well as links to articles and other information that I've found to be good resources in my parenting. I'm having so much fun connecting with camp directors from all across the United States in my Camp Director interview series called Happy Campers Interviews. We're talking about the social and emotional growth, as well as the character traits and life skills that kids gain at summer camp. To see the full schedule of interviews with links to the camp websites, visit my website at sunshine-parenting.com and click on the Happy Campers Interviews link. If you're a regular listener and you enjoy the Sunshine Parenting Podcast, I would really appreciate it if you'd take just a few minutes to give me a rating and a review on iTunes. I appreciate this review from Eunice811. I love Audrey's philosophy on parenting. The podcasts are informative and useful. Thanks so much, Eunice, for taking the time to give me a rating and a review. I'll end this episode with a quote from Amy's book. It's from chapter 4, which is called Prioritize Play. Here's what she says. As parents, our job is to step away from the organized activities and more frequently create room for authentic, life-giving moments of play for our children and ourselves.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.